This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include former Representative Connie Wilson, Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, Syndicated columnist and author John Hood, and former Lieutenant Governor Dennis Wicker. Well, this week we've got another interesting show that begins with federal actions and North Carolina reactions. We'll talk about the legislative session now underway, and we'll ask what's it going to take to make teaching great again. Let's get started. President Donald Trump wasted no time taking action, whether you agree with them or not. Most have affected our state, and there have been no shortage of responses. Let's talk about some of them. Dennis Wicker, perhaps the executive order that created the most response came from the president's decision regarding immigration, about who can and cannot come into our country. We've seen protests regarding immigrants here, especially within the ranks of research and high-tech industries. What problems is it creating in North Carolina?
Well, Tom, let me give you just one example. At NC State University, right here in Raleigh, there are 170 faculty and students who come from these 7 countries that have been impacted. They can't go home. They can't leave the country. They are people that can't be recruited from other countries, very talented folks from those 7 countries. This is going to impact us from medicine to engineering to technology. You know, I'll leave it to the courts about whether we agree with this ban or this rule or executive order that the president issued. But what really I think's got people riled up was the process. He issued this on a Friday afternoon around 4:30 and didn't vet it by any of the international leaders, didn't vet it by any of the congressional
Homeland
folks.
Security, the
Homeland
Attorney
Security is
General.
national. You know, we just got to do better than that.
Connie, it was really interesting to me because when Barack Obama was president, the Republicans used to just rail about the fact that he was governing by executive order. Don't hear so much from him anymore.
I guess what's good for the goose is good for the gander here.
Maybe so.
You know, I don't think there's really any surprises that this is the way that President Trump is handling these issues. He's the kind of guy who just goes out and gets her done and then starts trying to negotiate and walk things backwards. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this.
Chris, one of the things that was interesting was that after he imposed these executives order, the acting attorney general said she wasn't going to defend them in court. She got fired. Now, aside from when Richard Nixon fired, who was it, Archibald Cox?
Right, the Saturday Night Massacre.
The Saturday Night Massacre. Have you ever seen anything quite like this?
Well, it's pretty unusual, although I think she knew she was going to be leaving anyway. What I thought, Trump may want to get her done, but the way he did it, Dennis mentioned, caused chaos and literally affected people's lives. There's been a lot of stories, not just of academics and doctors, which are very important, families who have visas who are coming over here to take care of their sick parents. We have Iraqi translators who literally lives are at stake because they helped U.S. soldiers who had a visa. They were getting ready to come over. They got an email saying you can't come, you can't bring your family. We had Steve Bannon, the president's advisor, overrule the executive order temporarily and say even people with green cards who already are legally going to be here can't come. They later rescinded that. It was insane. This is no way to run a government, whether you agree with the order or not.
Yeah, John, some people are saying that at the heart of all of this is a little more of an attack on Muslims. Do you agree or disagree with that?
No, the candidate, Donald Trump, talked about banning Muslims. This executive order doesn't actually do that. Obviously, it's a temporary ban on immigration or travel from a certain number of countries and a temporary ban on all refugees. I think it's unwise. I don't think it accomplishes very much versus the cost. But I think it's an overreaction to say it's some sort of Muslim ban. Obviously, the vast majority of Muslims across the world can still travel to the United States. I think that's not the right grounds. Though there may be an argument about the discussion about religious minorities and whether they get preferences under these rules. Dennis and Chris are right. This is a temporary action. Whatever you think about it, and I think, again, I wouldn't have done it, its effects, while tragic, are fairly limited in terms of the number of people. The long-term implication is much more important. It has to do with the process. This was a significant policy that was clearly not carefully thought through. It was about vetting, but wasn't vetted, and it wasn't implemented properly. Set aside the legality questions, the constitutionality questions. When the Trump administration does more significant, lasting things, it better do it through a process that makes sense, or there's going to be significant damage.
And we saw an example of that this past week, Chris, because part of the executive order halted all the grants to the EPA, which has a big presence in the Research Triangle Park here. And this business of halting federal grants with contractors that are all over the state and all over the nation, he rescinded it later on, but doesn't that just go to show that maybe not ready for prime time?
Well, you know, it's one thing for a president to have an impulse. It's another thing to act on it and affect people's lives, affect jobs, affect families, affect international relations, affect matters of war and peace. And I think John is right. This is all horrible. But I can envision things that have even more draconian or horrible impacts on the United States and the world, that if he has another impulse on a late Friday afternoon and doesn't think about it, I think that's what's so scary.
Dennis, another one of the things that happened this past week was that the president announced last Tuesday night his nomination for a Supreme Court justice, a man who got very good reviews so far as being a good jurist was concerned. But what do you think the response the senators are going to have to this nominee in the confirmation process? Is he going to sail right through, or are we going to see another situation where Democrats balk and the Senate just goes ahead and exercises the doomsday technique anyway?
Well, that's a great question, and I got to tell you, I do think the Democrats are going to really take a close look at this nominee. I don't think it's going to be smooth sailing. I think it's going to be a lot of gamesmanship going on, a lot of things taking place. And look, you know, last year when President Obama submitted his choice for a Supreme Court nominee, they didn't even give him a hearing. So I don't think Democrats are going to be in the mood to really be very accommodating.
But I don't think they can stop a hearing process.
Well, that remains to be seen. I doubt that they can, Tom, but it depends on whether or not they exercise the nuclear option on the rules of the Senate.
Connie, one of the things that happened this past week was that there were news leaks about the president's infrastructure proposals, which he had all said during the campaign was one of his big platforms. One of the projects that was given a high priority, we're told, was the widening and repairs to I-95. However, there was also the suggestion that this might be a public-private partnership and therefore might invoke tolls along I-95. What's the response to that?
Well, that's been a debate that's been going on for years. Virginia's approved having, I-95 tolled through their area. I think South Carolina may have looked at something like that. And it's been fought vehemently here in North Carolina. It's something that will continue to be controversial, but it's such an expensive project that there will always be a push for that angle to help pay for it.
John, we've seen all kinds of protests to these executive orders that have taken place during the past week. 1,000 people at RDU, International Airport protest. Is this just, I think we asked this question a week ago, is this just sort of a one-off reaction, or do you think there's a beginning of a movement here?
There will be a protest movement because it will be in the interest of the instigators to have it. I do think they need to think very carefully about the boy that cries wolf problem. Every single thing that Trump does cannot be the beginning of the totalitarian takeover by the fascists. They've got to use some common sense. Reserve the most extreme kinds of rhetoric for policies that might arguably be extreme, affect lots of people and be lasting. But I do think the protests will be a tactic the left uses for years to come.
All right. Have you signed up to receive our free weekly email newsletter Spin Cycle? You can do it by visiting our website, ncspin.com. You'll also find video footage not seen anywhere else, perspective pieces from our panel, and my weekly column. Get more balanced debate from the Old North State on ncspin.com, NCSpin on Facebook, or on Twitter at NCSpinTweets. When we come back, we're going to talk about the legislature getting down to work.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
The slogan on our family farm is growing the next generation. It means using innovative technology to conserve water and increase yields. It embodies our passion for providing food and fiber for our neighbors near and far. It represents our desire to take care of our employees, our land, and to leave a better place for our children. Farm life isn't easy, but it's a good life, and I love what I do.
I help educate and inspire visually impaired students to strive for a brighter future.
I make sure visitors to the North Carolina Zoo take a walk on the wild side.
And I make sure that the fuel you buy is a quality product from pipeline to pump.
I support small businesses in North Carolina by matching them with hard-working, well-trained employees.
I make sure the roads you drive on are safe.
Scenic, the one voice speaking in support of the men and women who are making North Carolina great.
We now return to NC Spin.
As the nation responds to the whirlwind of President Trump's executive orders, our state legislature is getting down to the work of constructing a budget and setting policy. We want our panel to give you their predictions as to what we can expect in this session. It is not likely to end until sometime this summer. Connie, so far the biggest news coming out of Jones Street in this session involves whether or not HB 2 is going to be repealed. Senate President Pro Tem Phil Berger says he doesn't think it's likely to happen this session. Why?
There was a serious attempt made by Senator Berger and the Senate leadership back in, Christmas week, basically 2016, and he thought he really had a deal going there with the Democrat caucus in the Senate, and things fell apart for whatever reason. I think there's a level of distrust there, and because of that, it's going to be much harder to move forward in that chamber.
But Dennis, Governor Cooper is saying, look, the votes are there. If you add the Democratic votes to the Republicans who are willing to repeal it, there's enough votes to repeal it. But he doesn't seem to want to put it on the floor because he said some of the members of the caucus are opposed to it.
Yeah, I think Senator Berger and maybe Speaker Moore's issue is they want their caucus, the majority of their caucus, to go along with any repeal. And I think the governor is still trying to keep the fire going. I think Senator Berger is probably willing to do some talking, but I just wonder whether or not anybody is willing to give enough to get this done. It is hurting North Carolina economically. It really is.
John, the Democrats in the Senate introduced a total clean HB 2 repeal bill this past week. Have any chance of even being heard?
No, and in fact, I don't think that would have majority vote. If you added the Republicans willing to vote for that to the Democrats, it would not be enough to pass. This is where they misunderstand the votes in December. They misunderstand Republican position. There are some Republicans who think the law is fine as it is. They will accept whatever they consider to be relatively modest economic costs because they think the policy is right. Then there's a set of other Republicans who want basically the status quo ante. They want to go back before the Charlotte Ordinance was enacted and basically have both sides cool off and talk through some other solution in the long run. That's what they thought they were accomplishing in December until it became obvious that as soon as HB 2 was repealed, a bunch of cities were going to reinstate the same kind of stuff that started the whole problem. That's the nature of the problem. So they're going to have, in my opinion, a broader conversation that involves people on both sides in the legislature, local officials, educators, and others to try to figure out some solutions that most people can live with. A simple repeal misses the point.
Well, here's one thing they could do. The Republicans could say two things. One, this is about a lot more than bathrooms, and they could come out and say, we don't believe anybody in North Carolina should be fired or denied services because they're gay or lesbian or transgender. That would be a monumental advance. Phil Berger won't say it, Tim Moore won't say it, and I've never understood that, and we could get beyond it. Maybe we could figure out the bathroom thing, but I think this is about a lot more than bathrooms for the Republican base.
You are right, but let me explain why. It's very simple. Charlotte Catholic High School is currently being sued because they discharged a teacher who violates Catholic doctrine. They were sued by the ACLU for discrimination. If you cannot have a explicitly Catholic institution hire and fire on the basis of explicitly Catholic doctrine, then you do not have freedom. And if you just pass laws that don't have appropriate recognitions for religious conscience or religious institutions or whatever, then you're not going to ever have.
I've never heard of Senator Berger or Tim Moore say we should have it at all, whether there's exceptions or not. How about somebody standing up in the Republican Party and saying it should be illegal in North Carolina to be fired oh, and we can talk about exceptions if you want or whatever, but as a rule, as a policy in North Carolina, we should be at a point where you shouldn't be fired because of who you love.
You know, it really is about the bathrooms, and Senator Berger has talked about that, and what we're basically at a point where there is no trust among any of the parties. And when you have no trust, you cannot work out a deal.
Tom, here's the bottom line. I think to get a deal, Governor Cooper's going to have to accept some conditions, and those conditions by Senator Berger and Speaker Moore are going to have to be reasonable conditions. I think then they'll get a deal.
Talking about Governor Cooper, the Senate laid out sort of the process by which they're going to confirm the governor's cabinet appointments this past week. However, they're going to be relegated to subcommittees, and some of these hearings for some of these cabinet officials are not going to take place until first or middle of March. Is this just a stall, Dennis, on these cabinet confirmations? The U.S. Senate has moved so much faster on President Trump's appointments. What's going on here?
I'm not sure it's a stall. I think it's a new process in the Senate. We've never had confirmation before. I think they're trying to do it the right way. I don't see anything insidious about it, Tom, to be honest with you.
All right. But, would you all agree that this is taking inordinately long?
I suppose it probably should have happened more quickly. They haven't done it before with cabinet secretaries, though, of course, legislative confirmation of other kinds of appointments has been in existence for decades. But you're right, that this is a fairly new process. Some of this has to do with the governor and some folks in the legislature saying, well, maybe none of this is going to matter because of the lawsuit. Yeah. In my view, it doesn't even matter if the governor wins the lawsuit about the law that authorizes this. It just specifically authorized the Constitution. The legislature could enact it right now without a statute. They just use their constitutional powers.
One of the pieces of legislation that's expected to pass fairly early and fairly quickly involves classroom sizes. When the legislature restricted the size of classrooms, which a lot of people felt like was a good idea, they failed to include enough extra funding. So the schools, in many instances, are having to cut PE teachers and art teachers and so forth like that. What do you think is going to be included in that revised agenda? Are they going to add more funding for public schools, or what's going to happen?
Well, the bill that's been filed so far in the House is more of a quick fix. It just allows more flexibility in the number of students that you can have in a classroom for whatever grade that's there, which would give them the flexibility to pay for those PE teachers like you talked about. There's been arguments from some legislators, well, that money that we gave years ago within the budget was for reducing class sizes, but because they had the flexibility, the school systems didn't reduce the class size, and now the money's gone to other places.
Chris, we keep hearing that there may be some more tax reform on the agenda in this legislative session. In fact, the Department of Revenue came out this past week and said they wanted to add sales taxes to lawyers and professionals that are performing personal services. The governor is saying, let's don't cut taxes anymore. Let's take the monies that we've got and use them to fund our schools.
Well, the irony is you're asking this question after the last question, which is they gave a mandate to the local school systems and didn't give them any more money, and now they're talking about cutting taxes again. You know, after 2013, we said, a lot of people on this show said we shouldn't cut taxes anymore. Let's see how those tax cuts work. In 2015, they cut taxes again. Now there's a call to cut taxes again when we're still 44th per capita in education spending. We're last in it principal pay. We have this class size thing. I think the last thing we need is more tax reductions. Let's invest for a change.
Well, Treasurer Dale Falwell this past week came out and said that he believes a tax increase is necessary in order to reduce the unfunded liabilities in the state health plan and the state pension plans. Is the legislature going to be open to that, John?
No, he's talking about the long-term imbalance between the promises we've made to employees to pay pensions and retirement benefits to them and the amount of money we have available. Dale is not saying raise taxes right now. He's saying unless there is substantial change in spending patterns over a long period of time, money set aside in pension funds and health reserves, then inevitably there'll have to be a tax increase in the future.
And by the way, we're going to have an interview with Treasurer Falwell on next week's NC Spin. You're going to want to hear his perspectives that he has after having come into office. Connie, one last thing. One of your big issues for several years has been CON, Certificate of Need Reform. that seemed to get some legs this past week. Tell us about it.
Well, around the legislature, if you just stay working on an issue long enough and keep developing data out there to share.
Sooner or later, you just wear them down.
Well, they look at you and say, just do it for the woman, please, so she'll shut up. But anyway,
It's a real selling point.
Actually, it
right.
is. I know. Shut the blonde up. But anyway, the NC Chamber came out with their 2017 legislative agenda, and one of their items is reforming CON. We are hearing from more and more General Assembly members that say, hey, we need to start looking at this. Now, there's a lot going on in healthcare. You've got maybe Medicaid being block granted down. We don't know what's going to happen with the ACA, but we are hearing some growing interest, and with the Chamber saying something, that's huge.
All right. After these messages, we're going to talk about making teaching great again. Stay with us.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
We're working hard every day to save you money, protect what you've earned, and help you and your family as you grow older. When it comes to your personal finances, half of workers in North Carolina don't save for their future. With electronic payroll deductions into a North Carolina small business retirement plan, small businesses could offer retirement savings accounts to their workers, and best of all, there's no liability or ongoing costs to employers or to the state. www.ncworkandsave.org.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
You sleep on concrete till your body get immune to concrete.
My mom got my brother and I up and said, come on, we're leaving.
I became homeless in the beginning of this year.
When I was about 4 or 5 years old, our house caught fire.
I used to see my brother. If he see me, he'd turn and go the other direction.
We did the only thing that we could think of, and we went to a Salvation Army shelter.
We don't have this, what's your background look like? We just say, what do you need?
I remember the man from the Salvation Army coming down with a box of clothes.
The Salvation Army officer bought my brother and I an ice cream cone.
Last week, my brother walked up to me, and he just started a conversation.
Today I've given my life to the Salvation Army because I remember what somebody did for me, my brother, and my mom over 30 years ago.
The Salvation Army for me means hope.
Compassion.
Family.
Support.
The Public School Forum, traditionally the organization that's consistently promoted public education, recently released their priority list of goals for this year at their Eggs and Issues event. We want to focus on one of them, making teachers great again, teaching great again. Chris, the numbers don't lie. We've got a greatly diminished number of college students taking education curriculums. At the same time, we've got a teaching corps that's getting older and leaving the profession. What's it going to take to make teaching great again?
Well, I think a couple things. Salary is one of them. Despite some increases in the last couple of years, we're 41st in the country. The average teacher pay in North Carolina is less than every state that borders North Carolina. And I think teachers are being asked to do more. They have a smaller supply budget. They have kids that don't have textbooks, whether it's digital or regular textbooks. I think it's harder and harder to be a teacher. At the same time, we're having a hard time getting young people to go into the profession, and we ended one of the few scholarship programs we have for teachers. So some of this doesn't make sense.
I was going to ask Connie about that. Several years ago, the legislature did away with the program that guaranteed tuition in college for teachers if they agreed to teach for 5 years. You think it's possible we might see that revived?
I do believe there's growing interest for that program out there, and there's a good chance you might see it in one or both of the budgets that are coming up.
Dennis, another one of the subjects that's been talked about to try to help this is differentiated pay. Now, a lot of the education organizations are opposed to having differentiated pay for teachers, but in hard to find and hard to fill topics like science and math and so forth, do you think differentiated pay will in fact become a reality?
It's going to be, I think, difficult, quite frankly, to do that. I think teachers don't like having that in the pay scale. I really hope that they can work something out.
And John, the big issue that teachers keep talking to me about is respect. That one of the things that they think would make teaching great again was if they got greater respect. What's that going to take?
Well, that would be true. That would be being backed up by principals and administration when there are controversies. But the differentiated pay piece, I think, is going to happen, though it will be a difficult fight, but it will happen.
All right. After these messages, tell us something we don't know. We're going to ask the panelists too.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
It's a fact. Patients who receive care in the medical home from a trusted family physician reduce healthcare costs through prevention, early detection, and affordable management of high-cost chronic diseases.
Every dollar invested in healthcare matters. Let's invest them wisely, building on North Carolina's medical home model. Better health begins with a medical home, a trusted family physician, the best return on our healthcare investment. Learn about the importance of medical homes at ournchealthcare.com.
I help educate and inspire visually impaired students to strive for a brighter future.
I make sure visitors to the North Carolina Zoo take a walk on the wild side.
And I make sure that the fuel you buy is a quality product from pipeline to pump.
I support small businesses in North Carolina by matching them with hard-working, well-trained employees.
I make sure the roads you drive on are safe.
Scenic, the one voice speaking in support of the men and women who are making North Carolina great.
Love it when we ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Dennis Wicker, I'll start with you.
Tom, last year we had 6 sessions of the General Assembly, a short session and 5 special sessions. The closest that we came was in 82 when we had 4 sessions, and then the Civil War when we had 4 others. I don't know the point of this, but it's interesting.
John, tell us something we don't know.
Amidst all the furor about President Trump's executive order on immigration, a far more important and lasting executive order he issued didn't get much attention. It will require any new regulation to be offset by 2 regulations being disposed of.
Chris, tell us something we don't know.
School boards in North Carolina have the option of whether or not to have corporal punishment. The child advocates have been trying to end corporal punishment in North Carolina. There's only 2 counties that allow it, Robeson County and Graham County, and 2 schools within those counties have 91% of the uses of corporal punishment. It's time for a state law to end it.
Connie, tell us something we don't know.
There's a big battle brewing over eyeballs in the General Assembly and doing surgery. The optometrists who provide important primary care for eyes want to start doing surgery, which the ophthalmologists who go to medical school and have residency programs are concerned about it, quality of care. There's studies that show higher injury rates.
Are they going to get it?
It's up in the air.
Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, and read my weekly column, be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. Again, let me remind you, next week we're going to have State Treasurer Dale Falwell as our guest and have more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.